They laughed when he bought the obese virgin. But what the mafia boss did next shocked. In a secret auction, a ruthless mafia boss raises his hand and buys a shy, plus-size virgin the crowd mocked. But he doesn't touch her. He wraps his coat around her and declares she's under his protection. Why? Because someone forged a debt to bait him. Because she holds a secret hidden in old books, a code that could burn his enemies to ash. Now cameras flash as she becomes his fiancée, and the whole city watches. Roses arrive with hidden eyes, a rival smiles like a knife, and inside his own house, a traitor waits. When she's taken to the docks before dawn, the boss makes a choice that will change everything: mercy or blood. What is the truth behind her debt? Who inside his empire wants her silenced? And when the bullets start flying, will his shocking move save the woman they laughed at, or doom them both forever? The leather seats of Roman's armored car still held his warmth as B sank into them, his heavy coat draped over her shoulders like armor. The rain pattered against bulletproof glass, creating a cocoon of quiet that made her pulse gradually slow from its frantic auction house rhythm. "The contract is void," Roman said, his voice low and controlled. His fingers drummed once on the leather armrest, the only tell of contained anger. "Your landlord's scheme ends tonight." B clutched the coat closer, breathing in the scent of expensive cologne and something darker. Gunmetal, maybe. "Why help me? I'm nobody to you." "You're someone who was wronged." His jaw tightened. "I don't tolerate predators in my territory." The city lights blurred past as they wound through Manhattan's rain-slicked streets. B studied his profile, the harsh lines softened by shadows, the way his shoulders filled his tailored suit with lethal grace. Everything about him radiated controlled power. "The job offer is real," he continued. "My family's records need organizing. You'll have a secure suite, full access to the archives, and Kira watching your back until this is settled." He turned to meet her gaze. No strings, no demands, just safety and work. The car glided to a stop before a towering glass high-rise. Roman stepped out first, scanning the perimeter before offering his hand. B hesitated only a moment before taking it, his skin warm against her cold fingers. The lobby gleamed with marble and brass, security personnel nodding respectfully as Roman guided her to a private elevator. Inside, he pressed his palm to a biometric scanner. "Penthouse," he said simply. B's stomach dropped as they shot upward. "I should be terrified right now," she murmured. "But you're not." It wasn't a question. "No." She met his eyes in the mirrored walls. "I'm more afraid of what would have happened if you hadn't been there." The elevator opened directly into a stunning apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the glittering cityscape, while warm woods and rich fabrics softened the modern architecture. A woman with close-cropped dark hair and alert eyes materialized from the shadows. "Kira," Roman nodded. "Get Ms. Hale settled in the East Suite. Full security protocols." "Sir." Kira's assessment of B was quick but thorough. "This way, please." The East Suite was larger than B's entire apartment, with a sitting room, bedroom, and marble bathroom. Kira demonstrated the panic buttons and showed her how to operate the electronic locks. "I'll be outside your door tonight," she said matter-of-factly. "There's clothes in the closet. The kitchen's stocked if you're hungry." "Thank you." B's voice wavered slightly. Is Roman always like this? Helping strangers?" Kira's expression remained neutral. "Boss has his own code. If he gave you his word, it's good as gold." She moved to leave, then paused. "The coat suits you." Alone at last, B crossed to the window wall. The city sprawled below like a jeweled tapestry, while above, the helipad's lights cut through the rain. She watched Roman stride across it to the waiting helicopter, his movements precise and predatory. He'd promised to return before dawn. B pulled his coat tighter, inhaling the lingering warmth, and wondered what kind of man could make such casual violence feel like salvation. The helicopter's rotors thrummed to life, and she tracked its lights until they disappeared into the storm-dark sky. In the bathroom, she found designer toiletries and fluffy towels. The shower's hot water sluiced away the auction house's stench of fear and humiliation. She emerged to find a silk robe and pajamas laid out, all in her size, she noted, with a mix of gratitude and unease at the preparation. The bed was sinfully comfortable, but sleep proved elusive. Bee's mind whirred with questions. Why had her landlord targeted her specifically? What records needed organizing so urgently that a mafia boss would offer sanctuary to catalog them? And why did she feel safer in a criminal's fortress than she had in her own home? She padded to the sitting room, finding a well-stocked bookshelf. Her fingers traced leather spines until she found a first edition of Dawn's poetry. Curling into an armchair, she let the familiar verses calm her racing thoughts. Outside, Kira's presence was a steady comfort, her footsteps soft, but regular as she patrolled. The rain continued its gentle percussion against the windows. Somewhere in the city, Roman was confronting her landlord, and Bee found herself hoping he wouldn't kill the man. Not for the landlord's sake, but for Roman's. The city lights painted patterns on the ceiling as she read, the poetry's rhythms mixing with the rain and distant traffic into a strange lullaby. Despite her resolve to stay awake until Roman returned, exhaustion began to claim her. The book slipped from her fingers as her eyes grew heavy. The last thing she saw before drifting off was his coat hanging by the door, a dark promise of protection that seemed to stand guard alongside Kira's shadowy silhouette. Tomorrow would bring questions and complications, but for now, wrapped in borrowed luxury and unexpected safety, Bee allowed herself to rest. Through the window, the helipad's lights continued their steady sweep, waiting to guide Roman home through the rain. The night stretched on, full of secrets and possibilities, while high above the city, a plus-size librarian slept under the protection of a man who dealt in death but offered her shelter instead of chains. Dawn painted the Manhattan skyline in watercolor hues as the elevator doors opened. Roman stepped into the penthouse, his suit pristine despite the night's activities. A leather folder tucked under his arm held the fruits of his confrontation. Bee sat at the kitchen island, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. She'd changed into borrowed clothes, simple black slacks and a cream sweater that somehow made her look both professional and vulnerable. "Coffee?" she offered, gesturing to the carafe. Roman's lips quirked. "Black." He set the folder down and shrugged off his jacket while a housekeeper materialized to pour his cup. "Sleep well?" "Better than expected." Bee's fingers traced the marble countertop. "Though, I have questions." Naturally, he settled onto the stool beside her, close enough to share warmth but not crowd. "Let's establish parameters first." The morning light caught his profile as he opened the folder. "I'm offering you a position, organizing my private archive. Full salary, benefits, independent contractor status. Your suite has a lock you control. Your body, your choices, your movements remain yours." He paused. "Within security constraints." Bee studied him over her coffee. "And what do you get from this arrangement?" "Competence, discretion." His gray eyes met hers. "And the satisfaction of thwarting whatever game your landlord was playing." "I have conditions," Bee said carefully. "No lies between us. If you need to withhold information, say so directly. But don't deceive me." Roman nodded once, sharp and approving. "Complete transparency on the accounting," she continued. "I need to see the full paper trail." "Done. And if you cross a line, any line, I get to call you out, no retaliation." His smile was razor thin. "Agreed, though few dare speak to me that way." "Then they're not doing their jobs properly," Bee replied, earning a low chuckle. Kira appeared silently, nodding to Roman before addressing Bee. "The study's ready when you are." The glass-walled room overlooked the city, its walls lined with filing cabinets and leather-bound ledgers. A massive desk dominated one end, while a comfortable reading nook occupied the other. Banker boxes waited in neat rows. Bee moved to the first stack of papers, her supposed debt documents. Her fingers stilled as she examined the notary stamp. "This is wrong." Roman was at her shoulder instantly. "Show me." The alignment's off by 3 degrees. She traced the mark. "And this signature, it's mine, but not mine." She pulled out her phone, bringing up a photo. "See? They traced it from the condolence card I signed when Dad died. The library keeps copies." Roman's jaw tightened, a muscle jumping. He turned to Kira, who had materialized in the doorway. "Sweep her apartment. The landlord's office too, full spectrum. On it! Kira vanished as silently as she'd appeared. B began methodically sorting papers into categories: charity filings, property records, bank statements. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency while her mind cataloged patterns and inconsistencies. Roman watched her work for a moment. "You're good at this." "Pattern recognition," she shrugged. "Dad was a municipal auditor. He taught me to hear the floorboards creak." "Meaning?" "Every system has its tells, its pressure points." She tapped a ledger. "Money leaves footprints." The morning advanced as B established her organizational system. House staff moved quietly through the penthouse, delivering fresh coffee and setting up her workspace with everything she might need: laptop, scanner, supplies. In an adjacent room, she could hear them unpacking clothes. The soft rustle of tissue paper accompanied the careful arrangement of a wardrobe she hadn't asked for, but clearly needed. The thoughtfulness of it, sizes correct, styles professional but comfortable, threatened to overwhelm her. "You don't have to," she began when Roman passed by. "I do." His tone brooked no argument. "Your safety requires you to stay here. Your comfort is non-negotiable." B turned back to her labels, blinking hard. The clock on the wall clicked steadily toward noon, each sound marking another step into this strange new reality where a dangerous man's protection felt like freedom. She lined up another row of boxes categorizing years of financial records. Through the glass walls, she could see Roman on the phone, his posture coiled with controlled violence despite his impeccable suit. He caught her watching and inclined his head slightly. Acknowledgement, reassurance, warning all in one gesture. The morning sun threw their shadows across the polished floors, stretching and interweaving like the threads of whatever conspiracy had brought them to this point. B labeled another box, her handwriting precise and clear. Time ticked forward, carrying them toward whatever move would come next. House staff glided past with garment bags and shoeboxes. The soft click of hangers and closets provided counterpoint to the shuffle of papers and the steady rhythm of the wall clock. B's new life took shape around her with each passing minute, built on the foundation of that strange auction night. She turned back to the forged documents, mind already mapping connections and possibilities. The morning light caught the off-kilter notary stamp, making the flaw even more apparent. Someone had gone to considerable trouble to create this trap. The question was, why? Roman's voice drifted from the hallway, low and controlled, but with an edge of steel. Kira's boots whispered against marble as she returned to report her findings. The penthouse hummed with quiet purpose as noon approached. B smoothed a label onto another box, her fingers steady despite the magnitude of change surrounding her. The clock ticked on, measuring out moments between her old life and whatever this new one would become. The afternoon sun slanted through the glass walls as B stood from her desk, stretching muscles stiff from hours of sorting. "I should check the landlord's office myself. There might be more discrepancies I could spot in person." She moved toward the elevator, but Roman's hand shot out, blocking the button panel. His expression remained calm, but his eyes had turned to granite. "That's not happening." His voice was quiet, controlled. "You're not leaving this building. I can handle myself. This isn't about your capabilities." Roman moved to his desk, pulling up a digital map of Manhattan on the monitor. Red dots pulsed across the grid. "These marks, all civilians, connected to my enemies, or suspected of cooperation. Each dot is a documented hit." B leaned closer, throat tight. One dot blinked near her old apartment, another by her regular bus stop, a third at Jerry's diner, where she got coffee every morning. "The debt was bait," Roman continued, his voice gentler now. "They used you to draw me out. Every routine you had, every place you visited, it's all compromised." The reality of it settled like lead in her stomach. Her whole life, mapped out in potential bullet points. "My coworkers," she whispered. "The library. Call them, now. Clean break before anyone can use them as leverage." B's hands shook as she dialed her manager's number. The conversation was brief, professional, a sudden family emergency requiring immediate resignation. Her voice stayed steady somehow, even as her eyes burned. When she hung up, Roman was already typing on his phone. Severance package in your name. Enough to cover 6 months. You don't have to. I do. That granite look again. Because they're watching, and we need to show them you're under my protection completely. B returned to the study, forcing herself to focus on the papers spread across her desk. The afternoon shadows crept across the floor as she traced money trails through various charitable organizations. A pattern emerged. Shell companies, circular funding, all leading to one name. Horizon Bell, she murmured, pulling up their tax filings. It keeps appearing, but the numbers don't add up. Roman's jaw tightened. Enzo Valeri's pet project. Officially a charitable foundation, actually a laundering operation, among other things. A soft knock interrupted them. One of the security team entered with a large black box. Flower delivery for Ms. Hale. Roman intercepted the box before B could reach for it. His movements were precise as he opened the lid, revealing blood-red roses arranged in an elaborate pattern. Something glinted among the petals. Don't touch them. His voice had dropped to ice. He extracted a tiny device with tweezers, a micro camera, nearly invisible among the thorns. The card bore elegant script. She fits your mercy. I'll make her fit mine. B watched Roman's face as he read it. The muscle in his jaw jumped once, the only sign of his rage. Outside, the sky was deepening to purple, the first city lights beginning to twinkle. Seal the building, he ordered into his phone. Full lockdown, and get me Kira. He turned to B, his expression unreadable. We need to be seen together tonight, in public. What? But you just said, if we hide, it shows weakness. Cameras will be watching, which means we control the narrative. He checked his watch. We have until midnight to make our first appearance. The skyline blazed to life as darkness fell, a glittering wall of windows and spires. B stood at the glass, watching her reflection overlap with the city lights. Behind her, she could hear Roman issuing rapid instructions to his security team. Her old life had vanished in less than 24 hours. The library, her apartment, her quiet routines, all gone, replaced by this glittering fishbowl of danger and protection. The roses sat in their black box, a reminder that someone was watching, waiting to turn her into a weapon against the man who'd saved her. Security teams moved through the penthouse with practiced efficiency, checking angles, testing communications. Kira appeared with a tablet, reviewing protocols with Roman in low voices. The city continued to brighten as full dark approached, each light a potential lens focused on their upcoming performance. B touched the glass, cool and solid under her fingers. Somewhere out there, Enzo Valeri was orchestrating his next move, using her like a chess piece. But he'd underestimated her. She wasn't just a pawn to be played. She was the daughter of an auditor who'd taught her to read between the lines, to spot the patterns others missed. The roses carried their silent threat, but she refused to let fear paralyze her. Instead, she turned back to her desk, to the papers that might hold the key to understanding this game. The evening settled around them as she worked, the city lights casting long shadows across the floor, time ticking steadily toward their midnight deadline. The war room hummed with tension. Maps and surveillance photos covered one wall, financial records another. Roman stood at the center, his presence filling the space like a gathering storm. I need you to be my fiancé. B's breath caught. What? Someone's feeding Valerie information. To flush them out, I need something unexpected. Roman's fingers traced a pattern on the steel table. No one would believe I'd choose an accountant librarian to sort my private records, unless she was your future wife. The pieces clicked into place in B's mind. A love match that gives me access to everything. Exactly. It explains why you're here, why you have clearance. His eyes met hers. If you agree, I'll erase that debt completely. More importantly, I'll dismantle the network that's trying to use you. B studied the map, the red pins marking surveillance points. What exactly would this involve? Public appearances, photographs, looking like you're falling for me? His voice stayed neutral. Nothing intimate behind closed doors. And if I refuse, then we find another way. I promised you control over your body and choices. That hasn't changed. B straightened her spine. I have conditions. A ghost of a smile touched his mouth. Of course you do. My room stays mine. Locked door, no expectations. She ticked off points on her fingers. Every physical interaction requires explicit consent, and if I'm playing fiancé, I get full access to your archives, no restricted sections. Agreed. He extended his hand. Partners? She shook it firmly. Partners. Kira materialized from the shadows, tablet in hand. I've arranged dinner at La Maison, private booth, discreet security, but enough visibility for the right photos to circulate. Perfect. Roman checked his watch. We move in 30 minutes. The next half hour was a whirlwind. A stylist appeared with a midnight blue dress that made B's curves look intentional rather than apologetic. Someone else did her makeup, enhancing rather than masking. When she emerged, Roman's gaze lingered for a moment too long. Beautiful, he said simply, offering his arm. The drive to La Maison was silent, charged with purpose. B watched the city blur past, trying to steady her nerves. This wasn't just dinner. It was their first move in a dangerous game. Remember, Roman murmured as they pulled up. You're not afraid of me, you're fascinated, and I'm… He paused. Possessive but respectful? B suggested. He nodded, something warming in his eyes. Ready? The restaurant glowed with subtle elegance, crystal and candlelight, dark wood and white tablecloths. As Roman guided her through the tables, his hand rested at the small of her back, proprietary but gentle. Heads turned, phones appeared discreetly. The show was beginning. Their booth offered the illusion of privacy while remaining visible to strategic angles. Roman ordered wine, his thumb brushing B's knuckles as she accepted her glass. Every gesture was calculated for the cameras they couldn't see. Your left side, he murmured, lips barely moving. Man with the times, pretending not to watch. He'll sell the story by morning. B sipped her wine, using the motion to glance that direction. The woman 2 tables back hasn't touched her food, just her phone. Good eye. Roman's approval was genuine. Keep noticing things like that. They built their performance in small moments, shared tastes of dessert, quiet laughter, fingers lingering as they reached for bread. Roman played his role perfectly, radiating protective interest. When B dropped her napkin, he retrieved it before she could move, using the moment to brush a kiss against her temple. The message was clear to anyone watching. She wasn't just under his protection, she was precious to him, valued, and anyone who threatened her would face consequences. By 10:30, they'd given the paparazzi enough material to fuel a week of speculation. Roman helped B into her coat, his hands lingering on her shoulders in a way that made her skin tingle. The drive home was quieter, the adrenaline of performance fading into exhaustion. The penthouse welcomed them with soft lighting and silence. B slipped off her heels by the door, feeling the plush carpet under her tired feet. Roman hung his jacket precisely, loosened his tie. For a moment, they stood in the entryway, the weight of their new reality settling around them. City lights pulsed against the windows, creating patterns like coded messages. Somewhere out there, photos were already circulating, stories being written. Their performance would reach Valeri by morning, and then the real game would begin. The clock slid toward midnight, its quiet hum mixing with the building's ambient sounds, security systems, climate control, the soft whir of surveillance cameras. B flexed her feet, already missing her comfortable flats and cardigans. Roman watched her, his expression unreadable. You did well tonight, he said finally. We both did. B touched her temple where he'd kissed her. Think they bought it? They will. He moved to the window, his reflection overlapping with the city lights. The question is what Valeri does next. B joined him, keeping a careful distance. The city spread below them like a circuit board, each light a potential threat or ally. The game was in motion now, no going back, only forward into whatever tomorrow would bring. The quiet hum of the penthouse wrapped around them as Friday became Saturday. They stood together at the window, newly minted partners in a dangerous charade, while somewhere in the glittering darkness, their enemies planned their next move. The sunrise painted Manhattan gold as Bee padded into the kitchen, following the scent of coffee and butter. Roman stood at the stove, his usual suit replaced by a black Henley that emphasized the controlled power in his shoulders. He worked with precise movements, folding herbs into beaten eggs. "I hope mushroom and Gruyere is acceptable," he said without turning. "More than." Bee settled at the kitchen island, spreading her color-coded tabs and archive notes across the granite. "I didn't expect you to cook." "I sleep poorly. Cooking helps." He slid a perfect omelet onto a warmed plate. "Your system?" Bee tapped her notes. "Blue for financial discrepancies, red for shell companies, yellow for recurring names, green for clean transactions we can use as baselines." She accepted the plate with a quiet thank you. "The patterns starting to emerge?" Roman leaned against the counter, watching her work while his own omelet cooked. The morning light softened his features, making him look almost approachable. Almost. Through the morning, they fell into an unexpected rhythm. Bee built her archive system in the glass-walled study, surrounded by bankers' boxes and spreading ledgers. Roman paced the balcony taking calls, his voice a low rumble that occasionally sharpened with threat. He kept the violent conversations far from her ears, but she caught fragments: dock numbers, shipping manifests, warnings. By midday, the study had transformed into an analyst's dream. Bee's system brought order to chaos, each color tab marking a piece of the puzzle. During the security briefing, she spread the most suspicious ledgers across the conference table. "These numbers keep appearing," she explained, pointing to columns highlighted in blue. "Round figures, always ending in 0. They vanish into unmarked accounts and never balance." Roman moved closer, studying her work. His focus wasn't on her body, unlike the sneers she'd faced at the auction, but on her mind, her skill. His respect was almost tangible. A junior soldier in the back muttered something crude about the boss's new toy. Before Bee could react, Roman's head snapped up. "Docks," he growled. "Night shift. A month." His tone left no room for argument. As the man slunk out, Roman touched Bee's shoulder briefly. "No one speaks about you like that and stays in my house." The afternoon brought Kira with security upgrades. The panic ring looked like tasteful jewelry, rose gold with a subtle stone, but contained state-of-the-art tech. "Twist twice to activate," Kira demonstrated. "It'll alert security and unlock the service corridor." She led Bee through the study's hidden door, drilling escape routes with military precision. 7 steps to the first turn, 12 to the elevator. Remember, speed over stealth if it triggers. Evening found them on the penthouse's leather couch, practicing intimacy for tomorrow's charity gala. "The touches need to look natural," Roman explained, his hand hovering near hers. "May I?" Bee nodded, and his fingers interlaced with hers. The contact sent unexpected heat up her arm. His thumb brushed her knuckles, and she forced herself to breathe normally. "Like this?" She leaned slightly closer, playing the adoring fiancé. "Perfect." His voice was rougher than usual. They both remembered their promise, no crossing lines, but the chemistry crackled between them anyway. They practiced small gestures, his hand at her waist, her head tilted toward his shoulder, the casual intimacy of long-term couples. Each touch felt charged with possibility neither of them could afford to explore. "Tomorrow," Roman said finally, releasing her hand, "will be watched closely. Every gesture will be analyzed." "I know." Bee flexed her fingers, still feeling his warmth. "I won't let you down." "That's not my concern." He studied her face. "The gala puts you in their sights. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, use the ring. Don't wait." As night settled over the city, Bee finished organizing tomorrow's archive schedule. The study lamp cast soft shadows across her color-coded system. Blue tabs marked the money trail like breadcrumbs, leading toward answers they hadn't yet uncovered. She synced her panic ring to the penthouse security, its soft beep merging with the building's quiet hum. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: the gala, the performance, the constant awareness of watching eyes. But tonight, in the peaceful dark of the study, she allowed herself to feel something dangerously close to belonging. Roman appeared in the doorway as she gathered her notes. You should rest. Tomorrow will be demanding. Almost done. She straightened a stack of ledgers, hyper-aware of his presence. Thank you for today. The breakfast, the backup with that soldier, all of it. He inclined his head slightly. You've earned respect. I simply ensure it's given. The moment stretched between them, full of things neither could say. Finally, B switched off the lamp, plunging the study into darkness lit only by city lights. Tomorrow would come soon enough, with its galas and dangers and pretense. For now, they had this quiet moment of understanding, of partnership forged in shared purpose rather than forced proximity. The panic ring felt warm against her skin as she gathered her papers, its gentle weight a reminder of safety rather than constraint. She'd come here as a purchased pawn, but was becoming something else, an ally, a partner, perhaps even someone Roman trusted. The thought should have frightened her, but instead it felt like stepping onto solid ground after days of uncertainty. Dawn crept over Manhattan as Bee sat cross-legged on the study floor, surrounded by archive boxes. Her fingers traced the worn spine of a municipal codebook, its familiar green cover triggering memories of helping her father sort library donations years ago. Something about the margins caught her eye. Tiny numbers, so faint they might be printer errors, dotted the edges in a pattern. Her mind, trained by years of cataloging, clicked into recognition. These weren't random marks. They matched her old library card number. Roman, she called, voice steady despite her racing heart. I need you to see this. He appeared in the doorway, alert despite the early hour. What did you find? My father was a municipal auditor. He processed this exact book as a library donation. B pointed to the subtle numeric sequence. These marks, they're coordinates. He used my library card number as a key. Roman leaned over her shoulder, his presence solid and warm. Coordinates to what? A master ledger. B's fingers flew over the pages, decoding. Look at these reference numbers. They align perfectly with the Horizon Bell transactions we've been tracking. This isn't just accounting, it's a map of every black market deal in the city. Roman's knuckles pressed white against the table. Where's your copy, the one you donated? Years ago, when Dad died, it went into the library's surplus sale. Understanding dawned. Whoever has that book controls the city's black arteries, Roman finished. His jaw tightened. Every corrupt deal, every laundered dollar, all documented. Throughout the morning, B decoded more of her father's cipher while Roman made calls. The pattern grew clearer. Her father had discovered Horizon Bell's network and hidden the evidence in plain sight, using his daughter's library card as the key. By midday, Kira had assembled a team to trace the codebook's journey through surplus sales and private collections. She stood at the war room table, mapping potential locations while her operatives called contacts. The book could have passed through dozens of hands, she reported. We're checking every auction house and rare book dealer in the tri-state area. Roman gathered his inner circle, captains and lieutenants who controlled various territories. B felt their eyes on her as she explained the cipher, showing how the numbers mapped to specific transactions. This woman, Roman announced, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument, is now the most protected person in my world. Not for her body, which small minds might covet, but for her mind, which can decode what others can't even see. Several faces tightened with subtle resentment. One captain shifted, his expression calculating. Another touched his weapon unconsciously, but no one spoke against Roman's decree. The afternoon passed in a blur of preparation for the gala. B's thoughts kept returning to the codebook as she got ready, wondering what other secrets her father had hidden in those margins. Had he known what would happen? Had he left her this breadcrumb trail on purpose? Her dress for the evening was elegant but understated, deep blue silk that skimmed her curves without drawing attention. The fabric whispered against her skin as she stepped into silver heels, the panic ring gleaming on her right hand. You look perfect, Kira said, adjusting B's security earrings. Memorable enough to be believable as Roman's fiancé, but not flashy enough to seem like you're trying too hard? Roman waited in the foyer, devastating in a black tuxedo. His eyes tracked Bee's movement as she descended the stairs, but his expression remained controlled. This was business. They both knew it, even if something electric sparked between them. "Remember," he murmured as they waited for the car. "Stay within arm's reach. Anyone approaches you alone, activate the ring. Don't accept drinks you haven't seen poured. And if something feels wrong, trust my instincts," Bee finished. "I know." The car arrived precisely on schedule, sleek and armored. Roman's hand settled at the small of Bee's back, warm through the silk. The touch was possessive, but respectful, exactly what cameras would expect from a mafia boss with his new fiancée. They moved together with practiced ease, the result of yesterday's rehearsal. Roman opened the car door, helping Bee slide across the leather seat without wrinkling her dress. The interior smelled of leather and his subtle cologne. As the door closed with a solid thunk, headlights swept across the windows. The gala venue waited just across town, a glittering trap of champagne and danger where they would perform their roles under watchful eyes. Bee touched the panic ring, drawing comfort from its presence. In her mind, she could still see the coded margins of her father's book, the hidden map of corruption he'd left for her to find. Whatever happened tonight, those numbers were the key to unraveling everything, if they could only find the second copy before someone else decoded its secrets. The car pulled away from the curb, joining the flow of Sunday evening traffic. Roman's hand found hers in the darkness, a gesture that felt less like practice and more like anchoring. They sat in comfortable silence as the city lights blurred past, each lost in thought about the evening ahead. The codebook's revelation had raised the stakes beyond their original arrangement. This wasn't just about a fraudulent debt anymore, it was about power, corruption, and the careful documentation of both. Bee's father had trusted her with this legacy, embedded in library codes and numbers that only she could understand. The car glided through Manhattan's streets, carrying them toward a night of calculated risks and careful performance. The gala waited, glittering with threat and possibility, while somewhere in the city, a green-bound book held secrets that could bring empires crashing down. The museum's marble halls gleamed under crystal chandeliers as New York's elite mingled at the annual preservation gala. Bee's silk dress whispered against her legs as she walked beside Roman, his hand a steady presence at her waist. She'd memorized the floor plan earlier: 3 main exits, 2 service corridors, and a back stairwell that led to the loading dock. Enzo Valeri materialized from the crowd like a shark scenting blood. His silver hair caught the light, matching his razor-sharp smile. "What a delightful surprise," he purred, extending manicured hands toward them both. "The mysterious librarian who's captured our Roman's attention. My sincerest congratulations." Bee felt Roman's fingers tighten fractionally against her hip. She forced herself to breathe the way Kira had taught her. 4 counts in, hold for 7, release for 8. The pattern helped steady her racing pulse. "You're too kind," she replied, keeping her voice level. Her eyes tracked movement behind Valeri, servers weaving through tables, security personnel at doorways, the constant flow of bodies that could hide any threat. "We must have you both for dinner soon," Valeri continued, his gaze sharp, despite his pleasant tone. "Such an unexpected pairing deserves proper celebration." A server approached their small group, silver tray balanced professionally in one hand. But something in his movement caught Bee's attention. A subtle tension, a fractional hesitation. Her breath caught as she glimpsed metal beneath his jacket. Roman saw it too. In one fluid motion, he yanked Bee behind him and caught the server's wrist as the man lunged, forcing the concealed pistol upward. They grappled for a split second before Roman knocked the weapon aside. The server twisted free, diving for the fallen gun. Roman didn't hesitate. His own weapon appeared and fired in one clean motion. Blood sprayed across the pristine marble floor, the sound echoing off high ceilings as string music stuttered into silence. Screams erupted. Guests scrambled backward, champagne glasses shattering. Security converged on their position as Roman kept his body between Bee and any potential second threat, his breathing harsh but controlled. Valeri had vanished in the chaos. 2 of Roman's men dragged the shooter's body away, leaving dark smears on the floor. Other security personnel began herding shocked guests toward the exits, their voices professionally calm as they cited a medical emergency. Roman guided B to their table, positioning them so the long tablecloth provided cover while maintaining clear sightlines to all approaches. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his water glass. B caught his fingers under the table, squeezing gently. "The cufflinks," she whispered, leaning close as if sharing an intimate moment. "They're wrong for museum staff. Too expensive, and I saw an engraving when he fell." Roman's eyes narrowed. He signaled Kira, who materialized beside them instantly. "Check the shooter's cufflinks," he ordered quietly. "Compare them to our officer's formal wear." Kira slipped away and returned moments later, her expression grim. "Exact match to our syndicate's custom set. Only top-level officers have access to them." Roman's jaw clenched. "Sweep his body for anything else identifying. I want to know everything about him within the hour." Police sirens wailed in the distance as security began a controlled evacuation. Roman stood, helping B to her feet with careful attention to their public image. They had to maintain the appearance of an engaged couple, even as blood dried on the floor nearby. "Time to leave," he murmured, guiding her toward the exit. "Stay close!" They descended the museum's grand steps as red and blue lights painted the night. Roman's car waited at the curb, engine running. He handed B inside first, then slid in beside her as Kira took the front passenger seat. "Sir," she reported crisply as they pulled away. "The shooter had keys to a storage unit. Address matches a facility near our loading docks." The city blurred past the bulletproof windows. B's heart still raced, but her mind was clear, categorizing details. The shooter's stance suggesting military training, the way he'd focused on her rather than Roman, the premium-grade cufflinks that shouldn't have been there. Roman's phone buzzed with updates from his team. The shooter's identity, his movements leading up to the gala, any connections to either syndicate, all of it would be compiled and analyzed before they reached the penthouse. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly, studying her face in the passing streetlights. "Yes," B answered, surprised to find it was true. "I kept thinking about exit routes and sightlines, just like Kira taught me. It helped stay focused instead of panicking." His expression softened fractionally. "You did well. Most people freeze their first time under fire. Most people don't have advance warning they're walking into a war zone," she pointed out, "or a security chief who drills them in emergency protocols." Kira's lip twitched in what might have been approval. She spoke into her radio, coordinating teams to secure the storage unit location for their arrival. The car wound through nearly empty streets, Sunday night quiet except for distant sirens. B watched Roman's reflection in the window, the rigid set of his shoulders, the careful way he kept scanning their surroundings. He'd killed a man to protect her, without hesitation or remorse. She should have been terrified by that fact, but instead she felt safe. "The cufflinks matter," she said suddenly. "Not just because they identify the shooter as one of yours, but because wearing them was deliberate. Someone wanted you to know the threat came from inside your organization." Roman's hand found hers in the darkness. "They also wanted me to know they could get close enough to hurt you, that they had access to our security protocols and formal events." The car turned toward the loading docks, where more of Roman's men waited with weapons ready. Somewhere nearby, a storage unit held answers about tonight's attack, but the bigger question remained. Who among Roman's trusted officers had orchestrated this attempt on their lives, and what else had they compromised? The explosion hit like thunder, ripping through the garage's far bay. Orange light flared as two SUVs erupted into twisted metal. The blast wave knocked B sideways, her ears ringing as Kira's iron grip yanked her behind a concrete pillar. Water rained from activated sprinklers, creating curtains of mist that caught emergency lighting in ghostly patterns. Roman's voice cut through the chaos, directing teams to secure perimeters and sweep for secondary devices. "Stay down," Kira ordered, her gun already drawn. She positioned herself between B and any potential threat, radio crackling with rapid-fire status reports. Through streaming water, B watched Roman coordinate the response. His elegant tuxedo was soaked, but his movements were precise, lethal. This wasn't the careful man who'd cooked her omelets. This was the warrior who commanded an empire. Hours, crawled by in a blur of fire trucks, bomb squad sweeps, and security debriefs. Near 2 a.m., with the garage finally cleared and ventilation fans dispelling lingering smoke, Bee found herself in the kitchen with Roman. The overhead lights were dimmed, casting soft shadows across his face as he stared into a glass of untouched whiskey. "I should have anticipated this," he said quietly. "They're escalating faster than before." Before? His knuckles whitened around the glass. 5 years ago, I was engaged. Isabella, she was... He paused, jaw working. She was innocent. The bomb was meant for me, but she reached my car first that morning. Since then, I've learned to ration mercy. It's the only way to survive in this world. Bee absorbed this, thinking of the precise way he wielded both violence and kindness. "My father used to say quiet people hear the floorboards creak," she offered. "He taught me to listen for what others miss. That's why I catch number patterns that men like Valeri try to hide. The quiet spaces between transactions tell stories, too." Roman's gaze sharpened with interest. "Show me." In the study, they bent over ledgers spread across the desk. Bee traced lines between shell companies, explaining how Horizon Bell's donation patterns created a smokescreen for something else. "See these smaller recurring transfers?" She pointed to a column of figures. "They're paying for cargo routes, regular schedules, consistent amounts. But look at the authorization signatures, all vetted by family members, people above suspicion." Roman leaned closer, his shoulder brushing hers as he followed the pattern. The contact felt charged in the pre-dawn quiet, but neither moved away. They worked through another layer of her father's cipher, translating numbered sequences into shipping manifests and dock assignments. At 3 a.m., Kira appeared in the doorway, her expression grave. "Sir, we've verified the primary signature on those route authorizations. It's Julius." Roman went absolutely still. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as his eyes turned to Winter. For a long moment he said nothing, processing this betrayal from his own brother. "Everyone sleeps in shifts until 9, he finally ordered, his voice carved from ice. "Full internal probe starts then. Kira, double the watch rotation. No one enters or leaves without direct confirmation from me." Bee watched him struggle to compartmentalize this new wound. The brother who'd shared his childhood had just tried to kill him, had possibly helped orchestrate Isabella's death as well. The weight of that knowledge pressed visible grooves around Roman's mouth. Kira nodded and withdrew to implement the new security protocols. Through the study's windows, the city glittered indifferently, unaware of the power shifting in its shadows. Somewhere out there, Julius was moving pieces on a board that had just become deeply personal. Roman's hand found the back of Bee's chair, not quite touching her, but close enough that she felt the coiled tension in him. "Get some rest," he said quietly. "There's a panic room connected to your suite if anything happens. Kira will show you the access panel. What about you?" "I'll sleep when this is finished." His tone left no room for argument, though his expression softened slightly when he looked at her. "You've done good work tonight. We're closer to unraveling this because of you." Bee gathered her notes, hyper-aware of his presence as she moved past him. The night's violence had changed something between them. His protective instincts heightened, her trust in his capability deepened. They were no longer just allies of convenience, but partners in unveiling a conspiracy that threatened them both. In the hallway, Kira waited to escort her upstairs. As they climbed, Bee could hear Roman's voice drift from the study, issuing quiet orders that would ripple through his organization. Tomorrow would bring hard questions and harder answers, but for now, she had cipher patterns to decode and a few hours to process how thoroughly her life had transformed in less than a week. The faint smell of smoke still clung to her clothes, a reminder that she'd survived her second attempt on her life in one night. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt oddly calm, centered by the work ahead and the growing certainty that she was exactly where she needed to be, helping a dangerous man find truth in numbers while his enemies tried to burn their world down. The war room hummed with tension as Roman's captains filed in at 9 sharp. Bee sat at the archive terminal, watching faces reflect in her screen while pretending to sort files. 20 years of library work had taught her to read people as clearly as she read numbers. Captain Martinez drummed his fingers against his holster. Reeves kept checking his phone, but Julius, Roman's own brother, moved with studied casualness, his smile too perfect as he lounged in his chair. "Show them," Roman commanded, and B projected the shipping manifests onto the wall screen. "These are Horizon Bell's cargo routes," she explained, highlighting columns. "Every shipment corresponds to a charitable donation that masks the real cargo. And every route—" She paused, watching Julius's reflection. His smile didn't waver, but his left hand twitched slightly. "Every route falls under the portfolio managed by a senior family member." The room went deadly quiet. Roman's voice cut through the silence. "You're all dismissed, except you, brother." As the others filed out, Kira positioned herself by the door, one hand resting near her weapon. B kept her eyes on her screen, but her fingers hovered over the panic button Roman had installed at her station. Julius's laugh filled the room. "Really, Roman? You're going to take the word of your new pet librarian over your own blood?" "The numbers don't lie," Roman said softly. "And she's not a pet." "No." Julius stood, straightening his perfectly tailored jacket. "Then what is she? The woman who's made you soft? The one who has you playing white knight instead of running our business?" His smile turned cruel. Poor Roman, always trying to save broken things. Roman's hand shot out, gripping Julius's collar. "Choose your next words carefully." Julius didn't struggle, just reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded note. "Meet me at dusk. Bring the master ledger, and maybe your precious fiancée will live long enough to actually become your wife." He dropped the paper on the table, unless, of course, you'd prefer to repeat past tragedies. The implied connection to Isabella's death crackled through the air like electricity. Roman's grip tightened, then released. Julius straightened his collar and strolled out, leaving the threat hanging behind him. "We don't even have the master ledger yet," Kira said once Julius was gone. "The library copy is still being traced. We're not trading B's safety for a book we don't have," Roman growled. B swiveled her chair to face them. "Then let's give him what he expects. A desperate brother willing to deal." She pulled up a blank document. "I can create a partial decryption of the codes we already have, but build in a dead end, make him think he's getting real intelligence." Roman studied her face. "You'd be the bait." "I'm already the bait," she countered. "At least this way we control the trap." She gestured to the screen. "We plant a tracker in the envelope, let him think he's winning, and follow wherever he takes the fake ledger." "It's solid," Kira said. "We can have teams in position before he even opens it." Roman paced the length of the war room, tension visible in every line of his body. Finally, he nodded. "Do it, but I want triple redundancy on those trackers, and B doesn't leave the building." They spent the afternoon preparing. B constructed the false decryption while Kira's team wired microscopic trackers into the envelope's seams. Roman coordinated surveillance positions, his voice getting harder each time he had to say his brother's name. As dusk approached, B practiced the escape route through the service corridor again, memorizing every turn. Her hands shook slightly as she counted steps between doors, but her mind remained clear. She'd spent her life finding patterns in chaos. This was just another puzzle to solve, albeit one with lethal consequences. "Your breathing's off," Kira observed, timing her progress. "Remember, 4 counts in, 6 out. Panic makes you sloppy." B nodded, forcing herself to slow down. The weight of the panic ring on her finger was becoming familiar, like the way she'd grown accustomed to Roman's protective presence at her back. They were reviewing the final positions when Julius's text arrived at 11. The screen glowed with 2 messages. "Meet cancelled. I pick the time." Roman's face went blank, the expression B now recognized as his most dangerous. He set the phone down with exaggerated care. "He's playing with us," Kira said. "No." B enlarged the text on her screen. "He's telling us he has more control than we think. The cancellation isn't about timing, it's about power. He wants us to know he can reach into this building whenever he chooses." Roman's jaw clenched. "Sweep every floor again. I want every security feed reviewed, every delivery log checked. Find out how he's getting his information." Kira dispatched teams while B pulled up the building's maintenance records. Somewhere in the data stream, Julius had left a trace. People who enjoyed power games couldn't resist signing their work, even in code. The war room settled into focused silence, broken only by keyboard clicks and quiet orders. Outside, the city lights flickered against windows gone dark with night. 11 o'clock stretched toward midnight as they fortified their defenses, waiting for Julius to make his next move. Roman stood behind Bee's chair, close enough that she felt the heat of him as she searched for patterns in the building's digital skeleton. His presence should have made her nervous, this dangerous man whose world had consumed her own. Instead, she found herself leaning slightly back, drawing strength from his solidarity. "We'll find it," she murmured, fingers flying over keys. His hand settled briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of trust that spoke louder than words. They were no longer captor and captive, protector and protected. They were partners in this hunt, each bringing their own weapons to the fight, his power and her perception, his strategy and her insight. Somewhere in the city, Julius watched and waited, thinking he held all the cards, but he'd underestimated the quiet librarian who could hear floorboards creak. Bee had spent her life translating numbers into stories. Now she would translate them into justice. The study lights flickered at 11:30 p.m., casting strange shadows across the archive boxes. Bee's panic ring vibrated against her skin, a silent warning that made her blood run cold. She reached for her phone, but the screen was already dark. Power died in sections, like dominoes falling across the penthouse, until only the library remained lit. An island of light in growing darkness. The security panel by the door blinked from green to red. "Roman?" she called out, but her voice seemed to disappear into the shadows. Glass shattered on the balcony. The sound of boots on marble followed. Precise, coordinated movement. Bee ducked behind a shelf, remembering Kira's drills. 4 counts in, 6 out. Her fingers found the panic button, but before she could press it, a familiar voice cut through the darkness. Now, sister dear. Let's not make this messy." Julius stepped into the library light, flanked by men in tactical gear. His smile was all teeth and triumph. Behind him, through the broken balcony door, the city sparkled innocently. "Where's Roman?" Bee demanded, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Occupied, with a distraction downstairs. You see, I learned from watching him. The key to winning is controlling the board." Julius nodded to his men. "Secure her." Bee heard Kira's boots in the hallway, rushing to flank, but she was too late. Rough hands grabbed Bee's arms, cold plastic biting into her wrists as zip ties cinched tight. They marched her through the service corridor, past empty rooms where staff should have been standing guard. "Your brother trusts you," Bee said, trying to slow their pace. "How long have you been betraying that trust?" Julius laughed. "Trust is for people who can't take what they want." He placed something on Roman's desk, a small ring box. Inside, Bee glimpsed the severed wire from a security camera. Next to it, he left a note, making sure she saw the words, "South Docks, Dawn, the ledger for your librarian." They hustled her into a service elevator down to the garage level where a white van waited. The engine was already running, exhaust mixing with the underground air. As they shoved her inside, Bee's mind raced, cataloging details like pages in a book. Right turn out of the garage, 3 blocks straight, left at the intersection with the broken streetlight. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. "Pay attention to the small things, Butterfly. They tell the bigger story." 2 more rights, then a long stretch past warehouses. A massive billboard glowed through the van's windows. A neon lobster advertising fresh seafood. 3 blocks from the water, she remembered from her bus routes. The docks would be northeast. In the dim cargo space, Bee worked at the silk scarf around her neck. The fabric was expensive. Roman's staff had chosen it to match her eyes. Now she picked at a loose thread, working it free while Julius monologued from the passenger seat. "You know what's funny?" he called back to her. "He actually thinks he's protecting you. Roman always did have a weakness for broken things." Bee stayed silent, fingers moving carefully. The thread came loose. When the van hit a pothole, she braced herself against the rear doors, tying the silk strand to the interior latch. It would unravel as they drove, marking their path like a modern Hansel and Gretel. Nothing to say? Julius turned in his seat, studying her. And here I thought librarians loved conversation. I prefer catalog systems, B replied evenly. They're more honest than most people. He laughed again, but his eyes were cold. Charity in heels. That's all you are. A prop he bought to make himself feel noble. The van rolled through empty streets, sodium lights painting everything in sickly orange. B counted turns, mapped landmarks in her mind, while her thread left its subtle trail. She thought of Roman finding the ring box, reading the note, thought of Kira discovering the silk marker on the service door. At 12:15 a.m., the van joined a small convoy heading toward the docks. Through the windows, B glimpsed the water, black and restless under the city lights. Somewhere behind them, she knew Roman was already moving. She'd seen him shoot at the gala, the controlled violence, the absolute focus. Now that precision would be turned on his own brother. The orange light streaked past as they drove deeper into the port district. B felt the zip ties bite into her wrists and remembered Roman's words from their first night. I protect what's mine. She hadn't understood then what that meant, hadn't known how it would feel to be claimed not as property, but as something precious. Julius's smirk reflected in the rearview mirror. He thought he was herding a scared librarian to the slaughter. But he'd forgotten the most important thing about librarians. They specialized in uncovering hidden truths. And B had already found the truth that would undo him, encrypted in ledgers and locked in his own arrogance. The convoy's headlights cut through fog rolling in from the water. Behind them, a black SUV peeled out of the penthouse garage, engine roaring into the night. Roman's hands would be tight on the wheel, his face set in that still mask that meant war was coming. The silk thread would lead him to her, while Julius congratulated himself on a game not yet won. B closed her eyes and breathed, 4 counts in, 6 out. The van swayed around another turn, carrying them closer to the waterfront and the confrontation waiting in the pre-dawn dark. She might be zip-tied in the back of a vehicle, but her mind was free and sharp as ever. Julius had wanted a hostage. Instead, he'd captured a decoder who'd already broken his cipher and mapped his downfall. The orange lights continued their steady sweep across the van's interior as they drove through the sleeping city. Each flash marked another step toward dawn, toward the docks, toward whatever end this night would bring. The shipyard air tasted like rust and salt at 1 a.m. Metal creaked beneath B's feet as Julius's men marched her between stacked containers. Gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mixing with the harbor's constant groan. Her wrists burned from the zip ties, but her mind stayed sharp, counting steps and mapping angles. Time to earn your keep, Julius said, gesturing to a makeshift workspace, a wooden crate topped with scattered ledger pages. The papers fluttered in the cold breeze off the water. B studied the setup, her librarian's eye catching details. I can't decode these without seeing the physical pages, she said, keeping her voice steady. The cipher relies on print imperfections from the donor book. Each page has unique markers. Julius's jaw tightened. He needed her skills, couldn't risk killing his only codebreaker. Fine, work. He shoved her toward the crate. B's fingers trembled as she sorted through pages, but not from fear. She was counting seconds, remembering turns, knowing Roman would follow her thread. The seafood billboard would narrow their search. 3 blocks from water, northeast bearing. The ledger pages felt rough under her fingertips. She traced lines of numbers, remembering long afternoons in her father's study. He'd taught her more than just accounting. He'd shown her how to build safeguards, how to protect truth with truth. This line here, she said clearly, reading a sequence that triggered a buried memory. Her father's final safeguard, hidden in plain sight. You should know something about these records. Julius leaned closer, impatient. What? There's a dead man's switch built into the cipher. B kept her voice clinical, professional. Tampering with these pages alerts federal oversight. My father designed it before he died. Insurance against exactly this kind of theft. The words landed like stones in water. Julius went still, processing the implications. In that frozen breath, B heard it, the whisper of movement in the shadows, boots on metal. Roman's team sliding into position. The first shot cracked the night like lightning. B dropped instantly. Years of library emergency drills translating smoothly to survival. The edge of the crate had a metal bracket, old, rusted, but sharp enough. She twisted, sawing the zip ties against it while chaos erupted above. Bullets pinged off containers. Men shouted. Bee worked the plastic restraints faster, feeling them weaken. The bracket bit into her skin, but the pain was distant, secondary to the urgent need for freedom. The ties snapped. Blood rushed back into her fingers as she scanned her surroundings. The light control panel gleamed dully 20 feet away, mounted on a support beam. If she could reach it. Bee counted breaths, waited for a pause in the gunfire. Then she moved. Not running, but flowing from shadow to shadow like Kira had taught her. Stay low, stay smooth, let the darkness hold you. The panel's metal face was cool under her palm. She found the master switches by touch, remembering the layout from similar systems in the library's storage facility. Simple mechanics, binary choices, on or off. She threw the switches. Industrial floodlights blazed to life, turning night to stark white day. Julius's men, positioned in the open, became perfect silhouettes against the sudden glare. Roman's team, tucked into shadow, remained invisible. The shift in advantage was immediate. More shots rang out, more controlled now. Precise. Roman's people picking their targets. Through the metallic symphony of gunfire and ricochet, Bee heard footsteps on the gantry above, steady, purposeful steps she'd memorized from days in the penthouse. A familiar silhouette appeared through the haze, backlit by the floods. Bee. Roman's voice carried iron and relief both. Here, she called back, angling herself so he could sight past her position. Clear line behind me to your 2 o'clock. A shot cracked out, followed by a cry of pain. Roman had understood her meaning perfectly. She'd given him a firing lane while keeping herself safely aside. Bee pressed against the support beam, feeling the vibration of boots on metal walkways. More of Roman's people moving into position, boxing in Julius's remaining men. The air smelled of cordite and sea salt, an oddly fitting combination for this collision of violence and strategy. Through gaps in the container stacks, she glimpsed Julius backing toward the water, his confident smirk replaced by something harder and more desperate. The ledger pages scattered around the crate, forgotten in the chaos, curled in the damp air like autumn leaves. Floodlights caught the spray of waves against the dock pilings, turning each droplet into a brief, bright star. Bee thought of that first night in Roman's penthouse, watching city lights sweep across the helipad. How far they'd come from that moment of uncertain sanctuary to this crystallized instant of truth and consequence. The gunfire continued its deadly dialogue above and around her. Bee stayed still, protected by the beam and the angle of the lights she'd weaponized. She'd done her part, turned Julius's trap against him, given Roman's team the advantage they needed. Now she waited, counting shots and calculating trajectories like her father had once counted columns and calculated sums. Metal rang with impact. Orders were shouted in clipped tones. Through it all, Bee felt Roman's presence like a lodestone, drawing chaos into order. She'd seen him gentle in the penthouse kitchen, deadly at the gala, focused in the study. Now all those facets merged into a single sharp edge, cutting through the fog of betrayal toward resolution. The floodlights burned away all shadows, leaving nowhere to hide. In their merciless glare, every move became a declaration, every shot an exclamation point in this final paragraph of Julius's story. Bee watched it unfold with a librarian's eye for detail and a strategist's grasp of momentum. Above her, Roman's voice rang out again, this time with command rather than question. She answered clearly, giving him another vector, another piece of the tactical puzzle. Together, they would write the ending of this night in lead and light and truth. Through the sodium haze of the floodlights, Roman stalked between the towering cranes, his silhouette knife-sharp against the industrial backdrop. Julius stood waiting, gun loose at his side, a bitter smile twisting his features. Always the hero, Julius called out, voice echoing off metal. Always reaching for what you can't keep. Roman's stride never faltered. Drop it, Julius. It's done. Is it? Julius's laugh held no warmth. First that ghost you called a fiancé. Now this... He gestured contemptuously toward where Bee stood. This big virgin you parade around like virtue incarnate. You never could resist a weakness." "The only weakness here is betrayal," Roman said, each word carved from ice. Julius's gun came up in a fluid arc. "Betrayal? I gave you chances to be strong, to be what Father built us to be. But you?" His finger tightened on the trigger. "You keep choosing." "Mercy!" The crack of Roman's shot split the night. Julius staggered, blood blooming across his shoulder, a precise wound meant to disable rather than destroy. B's earlier words echoed in Roman's mind. "Don't damn your soul beyond return. Not for him." Before Julius could recover, movement erupted from the shadows. Valerie's lieutenant emerged with a fresh wave of reinforcements, their boots thundering across metal walkways. But Kira's team was already in motion, materializing on the catwalks above like deadly ghosts. B's mind raced, taking in the geometry of cranes and containers. Her gaze landed on a cargo control panel. Without hesitation, she lunged for the lever, yanking it hard. Metal screamed against metal as a massive container swung on its chain, its trajectory inevitable as gravity. The lieutenant's eyes widened a second before the container caught him, pinning his leg against a stack with surgical precision. His howl of pain triggered a cascade of action. Roman's men moved with practiced efficiency, neutralizing the remaining resistance. Scattered gunfire peppered the air, but it was already over, the cleanup phase of a battle decisively won. Distant sirens began their mournful wail, cutting through the harbor fog. Roman's head snapped up, reading the sound like a countdown. "Time to disappear," he ordered, voice carrying across the yard. "Strip the evidence. Move." Medical team rushed forward to stabilize Julius, who had crumpled against a container, face gray with shock and rage. They worked quickly, preparing him for transport to a secure facility, one of many Roman maintained off the grid. No public hospitals, no questions, no traces. B watched as Julius was loaded into an unmarked van, remembering his smirk in the penthouse, his casual cruelty during the drive. Now he looked smaller somehow, diminished not by his wound, but by the exposure of his true nature. The convoy assembled with military precision. Vehicles pulled up in predetermined order, teams loaded out according to protocol. Kira orchestrated the withdrawal like a conductor, her hand signals directing the symphony of escape. Dawn was just a suggestion on the horizon, the sky shifting from black to deep blue. The first hints of morning painted the tops of the cranes in pale gold as Roman guided B to their SUV. His touch was gentle but urgent. They needed to clear the area before first light brought dock workers and questions. Inside the vehicle's armored cocoon, the chaos outside became distant, muffled. B sank into the leather seat, adrenaline draining away to leave bone-deep exhaustion. Roman settled beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. Their fingers found each other in the dim interior, intertwining with an intimacy that required no words. His hand was warm, slightly rough from the grip of his weapon, but his touch remained tender. She could feel tension gradually releasing from his frame as the SUV merged into the sparse pre-dawn traffic. The city was stirring around them, shaking off its nighttime shadows. Early risers waited at bus stops, the first public transit vehicles of the day lumbering along their routes. Steam rose from food carts being set up on corners. The normal rhythm of urban life continued, oblivious to the drama that had played out at the docks. B watched the familiar landmarks slide past, transformed by the strange light of almost morning. The same streets she'd once walked freely now held new meaning, mapped with invisible lines of power and consequence. She felt the weight of change settling around her shoulders like Roman's coat that first night, heavy but somehow right. Roman's thumb traced slow circles on her palm, the gesture almost unconscious. Neither spoke. Words seemed inadequate for the space between gunfire and daybreak. The silence held everything: exhaustion, relief, the lingering edge of danger, and something deeper growing between them. The SUV glided through intersections, taking a circuitous route home. Kira's voice occasionally crackled over the secure radio, confirming the convoy's progress. Each transmission tracked their careful withdrawal from the night's violence back toward the relative safety of the penthouse. Traffic lights reflected off the tinted windows, painting their joined hands in alternating patterns of red and green. Bea found herself timing her breaths to the rhythm of Roman's heartbeat, steady and strong where their shoulders pressed together. The city continued to wake around their bubble of quiet, the sky gradually lightening to pearl. A garbage truck lumbered past, its hydraulics whining. A baker unlocked his shop door, the scent of fresh bread briefly filling the air. Somewhere, a church bell tolled the quarter hour, 4:45, marking their transition from nightmare back to normal. The SUV turned toward home as the first real rays of sunlight touched the tallest buildings. Roman's fingers tightened briefly around Bea's, a silent affirmation. They had survived the night. Together. Morning light filtered through the penthouse windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. At precisely 7:30 a.m., Roman stood at his desk, holding the fraudulent debt contract that had started everything. Bea watched from her chair, wrapped in a soft gray robe, her hands cradling a steaming cup of chamomile tea. The contract caught flame quickly, curling at the edges before dissolving into ash. Roman's eyes met hers over the dying embers, a quiet understanding passing between them. The paper that once claimed to own her was nothing more than dust now, scattered and forgotten. "It's done," he said simply, pushing aside the metal waste bin. His attention turned to a stack of legal documents, the foundation paperwork that would transform his cleaned archive into something meaningful, something healing. Bea set down her tea and moved closer, reviewing the structure with sharp eyes. The foundation would identify and compensate victims of Horizon Bell's schemes, prioritizing those who suffered in silence. Her finger traced down the first page, pausing at key provisions. "The quiet ones first," she insisted, her voice soft but firm. "The ones who lost homes, savings, dignity, without headlines or sympathy." Roman nodded, adding his signature to each page with deliberate strokes. When the last document was signed, he reached into his desk drawer and withdrew a small velvet box. Unlike Julius's cruel mockery at the docks, this box held promise rather than threat. Roman didn't open it immediately, instead turning to face her fully. "I want to ask properly," he said, his usual commanding tone gentled. "Not because of contracts or appearances or strategy, just us." Bea's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a platinum ring with a subtle sparkle that matched his careful approach to loving her. The question hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. "Yes," she answered, because she understood now that danger would always exist in their world. But cruelty was a choice, and he chose tenderness, chose her, every time. The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, neither loose nor confining. Like them, it simply fit. Exhaustion still pulled at their edges, smoke and sirens echoing in their minds. Roman cupped her face gently, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Sleep first," he murmured. "We have time now." They retreated to separate rooms, honoring boundaries until they were both ready. Bea sank into her bed, the panic ring replaced by engagement diamonds, and slept deeply for the first time since the auction. Evening found them both restored, the penthouse quiet, except for soft music drifting from hidden speakers. They came together in the kitchen first, sharing a simple meal and lighter conversation. The weight of violence had lifted, leaving space for something sweeter to grow. When Roman's hand found hers across the table, the touch sparked differently than their practiced shows of affection. This was real, chosen, consensual. Bea rose first, tugging him toward his room with newfound confidence. He followed willingly, letting her set the pace. Their first time together was unhurried, marked by careful questions and honest answers. Roman's hands mapped her curves with reverence rather than judgment, while Bea discovered the scars that told his story. Heat built between them naturally, unmarred by shame or mockery. When they finally joined, it was with mutual desire and complete trust. The next days unfolded like pages turning, each one bringing their world more fully into balance. Wednesday saw Valerie's network crumbling, his lieutenants scattered or surrendering as financial evidence mounted. Roman's men, now fiercely loyal to the couple who had exposed the rot within their ranks, executed precision strikes against remaining resistance. Julius faced prosecution backed by impeccable documentation, Every transaction traced, every shell company exposed. His own signature condemned him, a fitting end for someone who had weaponized paperwork against others. From his secure holding facility, he watched his carefully constructed schemes dissolve under the weight of truth. Horizon Bell's offices were shuttered Thursday morning, their false charity revealed to the world. B supervised as boxes of records were transferred to federal authorities, each one cataloged with the same attention to detail that had helped bring down the conspiracy. Wedding plans took shape between moments of justice. They chose a date that honored both tradition and practicality, and designed a home that would balance their different needs. The foundation's offices would occupy one floor, while secure spaces above protected their private life. B found her place naturally, applying her librarian's precision to curating grant applications and tracking restitution payments. Roman enforced boundaries with calculated force when needed, but increasingly found diplomatic solutions worked better, peace maintained through respect rather than fear. Thursday evening found them on the penthouse balcony, the city lights spread before them like scattered gems. B leaned back against Roman's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her waist. The same skyline that had witnessed her humiliation now stood witness to their triumph. "You're mine," Roman whispered against her hair, his voice carrying all the tenderness he reserved solely for her. "And I'm yours. Always." The words settled over them like a mantle, weighty with truth and promise. Below, the city continued its eternal rhythm, unaware that its darkness had been permanently altered by the unlikely pair who had found strength in each other's supposed weaknesses.